So joining our broadcast now is Igor Chelenko, a political analyst. Welcome to Ukraine Today.
Hello.
Igor, let's start with Lavrov's self-presentation in Alaska. It's already clear that many colleagues, journalists and political analysts online have already made ironic comments about how the USSR inscription under the vest turned into SS. So really, what exactly is there to truly hide or attempt to cover up? But it certainly reminded me that Sergey Lavrov is still following the very same old tradition of diplomacy from the Soviet era. And I remembered Gromyko, who used to say that in any case you should threaten and demand more. Someone will always swallow it all anyway. So what do you think? Was Lavrov's inscription, this message, actually a reference to Gromyko's words about destroying, blackmailing and defending your point of view without taking a single step back?
I don't think it's such a direct allusion specifically to the Soviet Union's foreign minister, Mr. Gromyko. Most likely it's an attempt to, shift the discussion into a kind of artificial framework, an artificial system of coordinates reminiscent of the Cold War when the world was divided between the Soviet Union and the United States. So what does Putin really want? Putin wants a new Yalta. Putin wants to fix the mistakes made during the collapse of the Soviet Union. Putin firmly believes that he possesses the capability and the strategic insight to effectively resolve critical issues pertaining to armaments, including both nuclear and strategic weaponry, through direct negotiations and diplomatic engagement with the current American President Donald Trump, or any subsequent leader who may assume the presidency of the United States in the future. Again, allow me to remind you of the significant bilateral summit meeting that took place between President Putin and President Trump in the year 2018, specifically on July 16, 2018, in the city of Helsinki. That particular event was their only dedicated bilateral meeting, a truly separate and focused summit. All of their other interactions were, for example, at the G20 or other similar international rendezvous points. Nevertheless, the topic of extending the New START treaty was also discussed there, for example. Now, obviously, this issue will be raised for a reason. It's like catching the last train, even though he wasn't announced as a member of the US delegation. The Pentagon has essentially confirmed that he will also be in the relevant city in Alaska. And, again, from the Russian side, Belousov is going. But in this case, in this particular situation, what surprises me even more are not the words or, say, Lavrov himself, or even his clothes. By the way, Lavrov's words are very reminiscent of a classic meme. They have a plan, and they're sticking to it. Lavrov basically said it word for word. But what's even more surprising here is the attitude of the Russian pseudo-journalists, who are supposed to present the meeting in a positive light. But instead they're showing, oh my God, they don't like the little couch they have to sleep on, they don't like the chair, there's no internet. You see, the curtains aren't hung right, everything is wrong, everything is bad for them. So what about...
Sorry, Igor, I apologize. Over there, they shout they'd endure anything, even stones from the sky. They're ready to do anything for the motherland, for their so-called sacred war. But here, they don't like the couches.
Exactly. And actually, that's an interesting point, by the way. How do their war correspondents work in the so-called special military operation zone? Do they think there are huge hotels or something over there? Well, it's ridiculous, it's laughable. And again, this shows that this meeting, in fact, yes, it was discussed for a long time. Its possibility was talked over. But as even the American side and intelligence services indicate, everything was prepared so hastily that it was simply impossible to do it all, let's say, with grandeur and everything else. Although, look, they seem to be promising a red carpet for Putin. It looks very funny. They could even play the Soviet anthem. Although, as we remember, musically, the current Russian anthem is no different. They just changed the words. So in this case, everything is working to whitewash the Russian dictator. But for us, the main thing, and I actually support Mr. Poroshenko here, is exactly what he said in the report, that the topic of Ukraine will be highlighted as a separate track. But for us, the most important thing is that the Russians don't push through their ultimatums. So the most I can realistically expect from the upcoming and very important meeting is, let's say, encouraging President Putin to make a definitive decision on a comprehensive ceasefire. That's the maximum needed for further progress along the diplomatic track to create the conditions for a trilateral meeting with President Zelensky, but nothing more. Yes, it's clear, Trump says. Here's the territorial issue, and whoever says it won't be discussed, the territorial issue is on the table. But Ukraine has already responded on the territorial issue, clearly showing the specific provisions of the constitution. We can't just pretend as if this doesn't exist. Therefore, all the necessary information Mr. Trump received during the conversation on August 13th during a lengthy online conference when President Zelensky personally traveled to Berlin specifically for this, and together with Mr. Marks, they held this contact.
Yes, absolutely. And today, Civica once again confirmed the words, the Ukrainian position, the words of the president, that Ukraine cannot be discussed without Ukraine, that our territory remains our territory. And the question is this: how soon can the next meeting in the trilateral format take place? Trump said that Putin and Zelensky can meet one-on-one, and if they want to see me, I will join as well. And at this point, there are various possible scenarios. As of today, it's clear that Putin was looking forward to this meeting in Alaska more than Trump was. He wanted to meet, and by the way, the White House also stated and emphasized that this is not a desire to legitimize Putin or bring him onto the international stage as a legitimate player. But that's how it turned out. In your opinion, how much will Alaska play into Putin's hands today, and how soon could a three-way meeting take place?
Well, Putin will benefit no matter how this current meeting ends, actually. Although, again, at first Trump threatened sanctions against the Russian Federation. Then they say that Trump isn't inclined to impose sanctions. So basically, it's all just beating around the bush. But the real question here is, how will this track continue? And how soon could a meeting take place? Putin is doing everything he can to avoid meeting with President Zelensky. Obviously, this has been happening since their meeting in Paris back in December 2019, when the Normandy Four met, and when Putin realized that the Ukrainian president was not willing to follow the ultimatum path that the Russian dictator had envisioned in his mind. And in this particular case, it's abundantly clear that Vladimir Putin is now exceptionally eager, specifically at a significant bilateral meeting in the distant state of Alaska with the former President Donald Trump, to at least verbally secure a certain advantageous arrangement that would significantly strengthen the Russian Federation's geopolitical position. And here, of course, there is a certain, indeed significant crossroads, because even if Putin now verbally agrees to a temporary ceasefire, but truly realizes that he won't be able to push his ultimate ultimatum or demands any further, then indeed he might very well start deliberately delaying the actual crucial meeting at the trilateral level. But where could it take place? Obviously in Turkey. We remember that Trump asked Giorgia Meloni whether it could be in Rome or the Vatican. We also recall that Geneva was mentioned, as well as some Arab countries like the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia. There are plenty of places where they could meet. The question isn't about the location. The real question is, will Putin be able to set aside his ego in order to actually start substantive talks about peace? After all, real discussions about peace can only happen in a direct meeting with the Ukrainian president.
Putin desperately needs Donbass. The situation on the front right now is quite intense and difficult. We know that the occupiers are working in small groups and trying to seize the entire region. At the same time, Simonyan boasts that the plane carrying the Russian delegation was served chicken Kiev. And we understand that, once again, this is an allusion to the 1990s when chicken Kiev became a certain term in politics. What did they mean this time? Is chicken Kiev a battlefield, or is it diplomacy?
Well, from the Russian point of view, this is once again an attempt to reinforce the message of supposedly dividing Ukraine. So this is precisely the direction that Russian propaganda is actively trying to push as much as humanly possible. But again, we profoundly understand that chicken Kiev has been served to Russians more than just once, and in actual fact, it's even become a kind of deliberate mockery in the profound sense that, well, Ukraine's agency and its significant contributions definitely should not be forgotten or overlooked. And Russia has another interpretation of this move, which is that, well, they have nothing of their own at all, just nothing, not even chicken Kiev. Again, this is an allusion to stolen history. After all, we remember how Putin, as the rumors go, promised that at his next meeting with Trump, he would again bring some maps and once again talk about the Rurikids, about the fictitiousness of the Ukrainian state, its artificiality, and so on. So in this case, again, there are many facets to this issue, but it's quite obvious that Simonyan's intention was to take a jab, of course, and once again humiliate Ukrainians. And what kind of peace can we talk about if the Russian delegation is set on further humiliating the victim state? That is, the delegation, I mean in the broad sense, meaning those very same propagandists of theirs. This clearly shows that they are definitely not genuinely inclined to talk about real peace. And this particular situation, let's say, places additional responsibility squarely on the American side to, quite obviously behind closed doors, present the arguments as clearly and persuasively as possible that this is indeed the path that absolutely needs to be taken.
And let's remind our viewers that we started with these symbols, these allusions. Lavrov's USSR T-shirt and chicken Kiev are connected because in 1991, Bush Sr. addressed Ukrainians with a proposal not to leave the Soviet Union. And back then, that speech and his behavior were specifically called chicken Kiev. That's why we understand that the ultimate goal of the Russian Federation before these negotiations is Moscow wants to control Ukraine, Belarus already, and we want you to sort things out with Azerbaijan and Armenia as well. So please, we want our chicken Kiev as part of the USSR. What does Trump get out of this? How might he act? What issues is he facing today?
6 significant wars ended in a remarkably short period of just 6 months. Consequently, it becomes abundantly clear that Donald Trump possesses a very distinct and well-defined plan. And when the White House itself quite openly and prominently posts rather obvious infographics on its official social media accounts, explicitly stating and suggesting that President Trump should indeed be awarded the prestigious Nobel Peace Prize, then at that point, everything truly becomes perfectly and unequivocally clear. By the way, I would like to note that the main and most crucial deadline was not actually August 8th, which was the date we were all eagerly anticipating and waiting for. So, what will happen? Will Trump impose sanctions or not? But the main and most significant deadline for Trump right now is October 10th, when the prestigious Nobel Peace Prize will be officially awarded. And now he is diligently doing everything possible so that, at least in terms of outward appearances and in terms of the established form, the entire process really moves decisively toward a genuine de-escalation. By the way, I personally do not rule out that Putin might, in the next month and a half, do a certain favor directly for Trump, just as at one time Putin did a favor for Russia. We remember that the start of the so-called special military operation was postponed in order to wait for the end of the Olympics in China. And in this case, Putin might also take the path, at least seemingly, of de-escalation during these 1.5 to 2 months, so that, let's say, by the beginning or mid-October, Trump can carry out his plan. Well, after that, there are certain crossroads ahead. Afterwards, Putin will show his hand. Either he truly wants to end things, or he will start preparing his state for a transformation into another format. We are already seeing electronic mobilization now. We can also see serious preparations on the part of the military-industrial complex, so there could be different scenarios. We need to take this into account as well.
We can already see this from the reports. For example, my editor just sent me a message saying that the bunker has opened, a little man with a suitcase from Magadan has flown out, and the estimated flight time will be 4 hours. So we can imagine that the meeting might take place at around 10 p.m. Kiev time. Let's take just a couple of minutes, Igor. Let's imagine what the possible outcome of today could be. How will this night end politically in terms of negotiations, not for journalists on couches? Although
well, this is only the beginning, just the beginning. And we understand that some diplomatic track is now intensifying, depending on how the meeting ends. But I also don't expect a sudden end to the war. The most realistic thing right now is perhaps an agreement, for example, on a ceasefire in the skies. In other words, an aerial ceasefire is what benefits Putin at the moment to limit Ukrainian strikes on Russian territory, on their oil refineries, on military targets, on military logistics. And Putin might actually agree to this in order to discuss the further lifting of sanctions. But again, today is definitely not the kind of meeting that changes everything completely. No, it's just a shift of the confrontation into a different mode. But Russia still needs to be encouraged to genuinely move toward peace.
As Trump said earlier, to look Putin in the eye and understand when he will finally agree to stop shooting. We'll see how this ends. These are truly important events, and we will continue to discuss them in our broadcasts of Ukraine Today. Thank you, Ihor Chelenko, political analyst, for joining us on Ukraine Today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.